Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. This two-part series of the Hangar Z podcast was recorded on location in Richmond, Virginia, at the Echo Public Safety Aviation Conference. Host Jon Gray has a roundtable discussion with Terry Miyauchi, Bell's Public Safety Segment Manager, Dave Callen, the owner of SR3 Rescue Concepts, and Andrew Baity, a Virginia State Police helicopter pilot. They share insights on the importance of networking, training, and collaboration among agencies. The conversation highlights the value of fly-ins for fostering relationships and the need for continuous training to ensure safety and efficiency in operations. The guests also address challenges related to funding and the necessity of recurrent training for skill development. This conversation delves into the importance of teamwork and leadership in aviation, emphasizing the need to set aside ego for collective success. It explores how technological advancements are reshaping the industry while highlighting the necessity of maintaining human skills and training. The discussion also touches on the challenges of leadership, the significance of communication, and the evolving landscape of aviation technology. Thank you to our sponsors, Precision Aviation Group, Spectralab, and Shoutover.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Well, public safety, like we talked about, you've got folks that are retiring. They're leaving units for other assignments. So there is constant change. And if you don't make an effort to institutionalize some of that stuff, it does get lost, And I think part of our goal through the podcast in telling some of these stories and memorializing this stuff is to help combat that a little bit. Because I do think that's a huge deal. People just forget, You might pay attention to a certain topic for 5 or 10 years, then all of a sudden you've not had any problems with that particular topic, so it falls off the radar and it gets buried, For you guys in Arizona, how did you kind of deal with that and combat that idea?
That it's that institutional knowledge. I mean, what comes to mind to me is the Vietnam era pilot, right? And they're largely retired at this point, and there is a plethora of knowledge and experiences that we all benefited from. Are we forgetting that, or are we still carrying that on? Well, there was generations after that as well that we also carry forward. I'll give you a couple examples. We John, you know this. We had a couple unfortunate incidents in Arizona there. One was 11 years ago, and we memorialize that every year still with a hike to the spot of the accident, and we tell the story. And we tell the story for, so that we'll never forget. Another one was all the way back in 1976, and we don't tell that story like we probably should, if that makes sense. So I'm saying we're not perfect in that regard. I don't think any of us are, but I could not agree more with Andrew that those past experiences we learned from. I think Brian Smith, who's a great safety advocate, his saying is we're not crashing new ways. We're not figuring out new ways to crash helicopters. We're just not learning from those old. I totally butchered his statement, but I think you get the point with that.
Yeah. So I'll tell Brian you said that.
Yeah.
Well, I know that resonates with you and the whole founding SR3. Can you tell us the story of that and how exactly what we're talking about has lent to the mission that you guys have at SR3?
Without going, in depth into it, we basically had a fatal accident during a night hoist mission up in the mountains, and it was unfortunate because it was preventable. We were using an outdated hoist hook that allowed Dave Van Buskirk, whose call sign was SR3, to dynamically roll out and become disconnected from the hoist hook, and he fell to his death. And it's very unfortunate again because it was preventable. And I've always told people, the locking hoist hook that Life Saving Systems makes, the D-lock hook, it's a little over $1,000, and Dave's life was worth a hell of a lot more than $1,000. Yeah. But the sad thing about that accident was, I've always said this too, that the accident occurred July 23rd of 2013. But the accident started many years prior to that because there was a culture that started to embed itself into the unit. And that culture was that, we stopped looking for outside training. We stopped sending people to conferences. We stopped, really doing anything other than developing this attitude that, hey, we are the best at this. No one can come in here and tell us how to do this better. And, unfortunately, the senior folks in those units, just kind of adopted that, and then it spread. And then, had we known that we should have replaced equipment and procedures were outdated, and there was many things that came out of that accident, unfortunately. But had we not adopted that mindset, then I believe that the accident would have never happened. But that's unfortunate. And as Terry said, we memorialized that event, and SR3 was founded in his honor, because when Jason Connell and I originally, who was in search and rescue, and Dave Van Buskirk was one of our best friends. And it sucks. I mean, you guys both have experienced loss, I'm sure, and unfortunately it happens. You do this long enough, these things happen, but it stings, man.
Yeah. But
Jason and I initially had started SR3 just because we wanted to raise awareness on that specific accident and try to promote safety within the rescue industry. And it grew from there. I'd like to think we've done a really good job honoring Dave and his family, to try to do the right thing. And I think we have, but it's just interesting because to me, it was a cultural thing, that caused that accident. And, that's another thing, going back to training and not even so much just training, but like, these conversations that we're talking about. I feel like I always benefit more from talking to folks like yourselves about, like you said, hey, tell me, Terry, tell me how have you guys done it? Your whole career, there's so much knowledge and experience there. And especially when somebody has had something go wrong, if they've had an emergency procedure, or any of those things, I've always been like a sponge. I'm tell me more, so you learn so much at these events, even more so, I think, than sitting, in some presentation by somebody, because those are great. I love them. And the instruction's great. But the real learning, I feel like, occurs like right here around this table, or at the bar, or at a restaurant, or in, conversations.
Absolutely.
And, unfortunately with Dave's accident, I feel like, had we had folks going and somebody would have said, hey man, we need to replace that hoist hook. This is a serious, like, big hole in the Swiss cheese model. We need to remove that hole. And, unfortunately it didn't happen.
Yeah. You talk about the accident chain and how that preceded the accident by a long time. And I think that's what we see generally, right? You look at the culture of the agency that has an accident, and you could go back maybe 10 years in cases and look at the political culture that surrounded that unit, the social culture and everything else. Like you say, not going to training, not having someone in coming to do a safety audit. That's one of the neatest things I think you guys do is just go in and, hey, let me look at your program, and I'll let you know what I think. To get that outside perspective, I think is really important, because you do get in the mindset like, well, we haven't had a problem and we've been in operation for 30 years. We're fine, but you haven't had an experience like what happened to you guys, and what you're describing.
I think there's an element that you just have to destigmatize an audit from being a bad thing. If you have a finding in an audit, it's just an area for improvement. It's not an F on a report card. It's just a weakness that you're trying to shore up. And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations that I've seen military or in law enforcement, that, hey man, I'm not giving you a failing grade. I'm telling you that there's room for improvement, and that's okay, man. Like, it's okay. But it just kind of goes back to sometimes episode 69. I like this one, the Leadership Summit, that you got to let go of your ego. And it's okay to admit that you're not the smartest guy in the room, that you don't have the best practices. I have very few original thoughts. Like, if we're just being honest, I am an idea pirate, and I pillage like where I can.
Idea pirate.
And so I'm just doing the best that I can to go out there and go, I really like that. And that's how I got tied into Hangar Z was, all right, I'm new to law enforcement. I have a background that has some elements that can be very good for this mission, but I don't know what I don't know. So cool. And I just remember sitting there going episode by episode, and I'd hear something and be like, I need to write that down. I need to write that down. And you're right, man. It just comes from sitting around and having those conversations and having a beverage of the day and going, cool, man. How do you guys do this?
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot.
I think you look at what SR3 is doing, tactical flying, Clay and Jack, they get to go around and talk to all these agencies and all these folks and hear how they're doing things. So you become this sponge, and you can take the things that you like and and spread that to agencies that need that. So it's neat to see you guys. I think, was it Nick that calls himself the carrier pigeon? He's spreading the message from village to village, essentially. And you guys do see the good, bad, and ugly of the industry. You talk about how you use that to your advantage when you train.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point, Nick, us at SR3, I mean, the other training companies as well, that's a big part of what we are always doing. I come to a conference, but I'm like a sponge too. I need to learn. I need to engage with everybody. There's always better ways. There's always new gear. There's always, new aircraft systems. Everything is evolving. And that's part of what we need to do. I know Bell's doing it. Everybody's doing it. You have to stay ahead. But that's one of the things that, we take pride in, is that we're peers is the way I look at it. We're honored to come in and train people, but, we're, myself and the other folks with SR3 and, any of these other training companies, we're on the same level as the people that we're working with. We just have we're blessed with the ability to go around and absorb all these things. And every time we go to a new organization, we pick up little things. We see things that they're doing and gear that they're using, or sometimes we see somebody do something that's very unique with something, and we're like, man, that's amazing. You guys just came up with that on your own. Like, we're going to start doing that. So we adopt it, and it's always evolving, and we push it out. So yeah, you have to do that, because again, if you don't, and all of a sudden you're just living in this bubble, you could go 30 years, like you said, without anything happening. But, the absence of an accident doesn't imply the presence of safety. I
like that.
And things have to evolve. So yeah, guys like Nick and Clay and everybody, they're going around just kind of, they are the carrier pigeons. They're the ones that are soaking everything up, and then they just deliver it to you, which is great. We need more of that in the industry for sure.
Terry, you've got a unique perspective on that as well, being that you're traveling international with Bell and visiting with agencies that are doing things that we would never even imagine doing. How's that influenced your kind of outlook on law enforcement aviation or public safety aviation in general?
It's a great question, John, and I do have the privilege of visiting a lot of units around the world, and I'm amazed at what they have in common. And we were talking about this earlier. We all have the common goal of public safety. We want to catch bad guys. We want to save the lives, save the property, et cetera, et cetera. We all have the political and the budget challenges. It seems to be everywhere, no matter how big the budget or how small the budget is, it's a challenge. But the third one that ties into what you're asking, and it's what Andrew said, it's ego. It is literally killing us. It kills our leadership, it kills our safety, and it's horrendous. And I want to be careful that we have a very good reason to be proud in police and public safety aviation, but when we allow that pride to become a self-serving ego, we lose out. To Andrew's point on an audit, if you're a unit, this could be a pretty direct statement for your listeners, but if you're a unit, you're a commander, an aviation manager, an individual, and you're resistant to the external audit, this is the direct part, you perhaps maybe have an ego problem.
Yeah.
If you are not willing to have someone look under the hood and tell you how you can improve, areas of improvement, as you said, you probably need to look in that mirror and have that reflection. I hate to say that's a common theme around the world, but it's definitely an area that I think we can improve in.
Yeah,
it's very direct, as I said.
I think given the personality types that are drawn to this profession and career, I think you tend to see that. And again, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Same personality type is probably driven or drawn to this thing. So I think that's part of it too. But understanding that, recognizing the need to combat that, checking your ego at the door, and learning from the mistakes of others and making yourself better is required to be successful.
Right.
I think we're all looking for small gains and ways to make ourselves better every day. And I think if you don't have that ability to check your ego at the door, you're losing out. It's going to be tough.
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, Sol 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
An interesting element to that is the ability to do a mindset shift when you move into a management position. And so, I had a great commanding officer in the past that, when I promoted from a captain to a major, he pulled me into his office and he was like, all right, hey man, let's talk about what that means. He goes, you've proven yourself on the field, all right? You're a great key player, but you're moving to the coaching staff, okay? And I know that you want to catch long balls, and I know you want to be in the end zone and score. But guess what? It's not like that anymore. You're on the coaching staff, and I'm the head coach, all right? And right now, you're special teams, and that's cool, man. And I need you there, but I need the mindset to shift. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be effective in what I need you to do at this level. And sometimes I feel like that's what I see is, all right, hey, guys want to fly forever. They want to live on the line. All right. And if you accept that management role and that supervisory role, well, there's a mindset shift. Hey, dude, you're not the guy that's putting guys on the hook right now. You're the guy that are facilitating that mission and really not losing sight of that. And sometimes, hey, it's kind of that not everybody's meant to move into that role. Not everybody's fit for that role, or maybe they're not resourced for the mentorship to go into that role. And what I mean by that is it's not a cookie cutter approach. I've seen my brother is a cop, my dad, and what I see is like in the professional development, it's a very linear process that you go, okay, well, I'm going to go from a patrol officer, and then I'm going to go to a first line supervisor course as a sergeant, and then I'm going to go to the National Academy. And okay, how does that help you run an aviation division? How does that help you with the largest budget within the department that you're potentially responsible for? How does that help you run a team? How does that help you when you are a little bit different than everybody else? And oh, by the way, you're a supporting arms. Like, you're not the main effort. The patrol is the main effort. And so are you able to, again, check that ego and go, it's not about me. It's not about aviation. It's about what I can support for the guy on the ground. And then as a manager, it's about creating big Simon Sinek guy, that circle of safety around your guys and going, hey, I'm going to protect you from outside threats, and I'm going to help resource you to be successful here. So that was one of the big things that I always really liked from that commanding officer is it's a mindset shift. Dude, you're going to the coaching staff. I know you want to throw long balls. Get over it.
That's cool. I mean, leadership development, I think, is what you're talking about. Awesome that he sat you down and kind of went through that explanation. When I look at, from my perspective, the law enforcement culture is really bad at developing that leadership personality and setting that person up to be successful. So I love listening to your talks on leadership because so many of the points resonate with how I view things. Any insight from you on how is a culture and as a group do we improve that leadership development side of what we're doing?
It's a great question, John. I think in aviation and public safety aviation, I think we do a great job of developing technicians, pilots, operators, paramedics, et cetera, and we don't do as good of a job as developing leaders. And it's critical. I mean, it is absolutely critical. The leader is the one that sets the culture tone, right? So what are we doing to develop that? As a side note, ECHO, as you're aware, is developing a leadership track and a leadership training program. I think it's spot on. They said it's an area that we're weak in. Could not agree more. So what does that look like? There's a number of things that you do, but it starts at the core with, I know I preach this a lot, but check your ego at the door. It's killing your leadership. Even if I am full of myself and I just want to promote myself to the top, I'm foolish if I don't tap into the team. If this is the team here and you three gentlemen are only half as good as I think you are, you're still collectively better than I am by myself. I would be a fool not to tap into that resource. I would be a fool not to remove those barriers and enable them to help me do better. So there's that ego component, and it's really, it's not about me as the leader. It's about the team. I love your analogy. I'll even simplify it further. we're all on a bus. We're all on hopefully it's not a short bus, but we're all on a bus. And when you take on that leadership role, you're no longer the passenger, you're in the driver's seat. You all have the same destination, the same goal that you're trying to do, but you have different responsibilities now in that driver's seat. And I think we can do better at developing those skills is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, again, going back to you, you've been all over the country and all over the world dealing with leadership as you do your training. How do you take the deficiencies we're talking about as a culture and address that? From your perspective, how can we improve our leadership development in law enforcement aviation or law enforcement in general?
That's a great question. I think, honestly, it does start with ego. It's hard. And the other thing in my personal experience is I think we all could agree there's people that are very natural leaders. There's people that are very selfless. That makes a good leader, I think, and that goes back to ego, not having a huge ego. But my own personal experience, when I promoted to sergeant, I never really had a true leadership position, never been an actual designated supervisor. And like a lot of law enforcement agencies, you go through a lot of procedural type training, get a lot of, how to do the black and white type, part of the job. But aside from, and I'm throwing my old agency under the bus here because it's improved dramatically since. But, I remember a lot of different people coming in, showing a lot of clips from Band of Brothers. A lot of times the same clip over and over again from Band of Brothers, to the point where one of my friends was a lieutenant, came in and showed the same clip. And he was like, "What did you think of my presentation?" I was like, "Dude, if I see one more thing of Lieutenant Spears running to link up with the men," he's like, "What are you talking about? It's great." And I was like, "Well, you were the third guy that showed that clip. We need something better, But it's tough because, I had no idea what I was doing. But I think if you're trying to make yourself better, if you can put your ego aside and realize that, yeah, you have to be selfless. And you need to put yourself last, always. The mission and the people come first, and you have to take care of your people. And that's tough. It doesn't come easy for a lot of people. And, I kind of had to struggle my way through that, especially, where I promoted, I had to leave the area and go right back to patrol like a lot of agencies do. And now I've got a squad of 10 officers that are brand new and they're looking to me for everything.
Yeah. like, bro, I'm looking at you. How do I do this?
No, it's like fake it till you make it. As far as how that translates over to the stuff that we're doing, we don't see a lot of that. We might have a little bit of a taste or a feel for, good or poor leadership within organizations when we're there for a week or so to train. A lot more of that becomes evident, I think, during a safety audit. You might get a little bit more feedback or see a little bit more of the results of it. But as far as on our end, we don't typically see the results of that as much during the time that we're there training. But I will say that if you do see it and it's good, it absolutely stands out. To give you the example with Andrew here, just the amount of time and stuff that he spent, again, selflessly. And he is not, humbly, the guy's a very humble man, but give credit where credit's due. He worked his tail off to make that event as successful as it was. But that's an example of good leadership, and that's because he's putting everything else aside, or he's putting, his stuff aside, that he realizes what needs to be done and he's doing it. So like our experience with him, all the communication, the emails, all the things, like that was extremely successful and everybody benefited because of what, how he handled that, how he carries himself. And, that's good leadership, and I guess we have seen kind of sometimes where we've gone places to train where, the communication isn't great, the organization isn't great, hey, here's what we need, and then we don't get it type of a thing. So then our training is impacted and we have to pick up the slack in that regard. But, fortunately with the flying event, we had the exact opposite. And because of that, it was a home run. So.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Leadership isn't a title, usually. It comes down to someone's willingness to take the bull by the horns and do something that's necessary for the benefit of everybody else that you work with. So kudos to you for doing that. I know a lot of personal sacrifice came as a side product of what you did there.
I appreciate that, but it wasn't about me. The event was successful because the team was successful. And, I thank them from the bottom of my heart yesterday because the parking plan was not the parking plan and the layout was not the layout. And a lot of the things that got discussed did not go the way that we discussed them on game day. And you have a plan. Sometimes the plan doesn't survive first contact, but it was everybody's collective buy-in to the event and everybody's willingness to be flexible that made it a success. And it wasn't me. I mean, and you see great leaders during the course of that event. You know, I don't know if you guys stuck around to the end there, and I'll throw this out here. The lieutenant colonel that gave the opening remarks, Eric Owen, just what an outstanding leader, because at the end of it, the guy's sitting there putting folding chairs on the rack. I was
just going to say, he was helping put furniture away, and that is the mark of a true leader.
And you just go, that's a guy that I want to follow. That's a guy that I want to mirror. That's a guy that I want to sit down and learn from. And I know personally, leadership is a constant development process, and I have benefited more than anybody from having people that are willing to take me under their wing, to have positive conversations, but more importantly, willing to have tough conversations and go, you need change, you need to adapt, you need to be flexible. And I think as long as people keep doing that and they check their ego at the door, like, they're successful. But it's always, you're only as successful as the team that backs you. And that's all the fly-in was. It was an all-hands effort.
Sure.
Absolutely. We're only 6 pilots at that base. We have 6 medics. We have 2 supervisors on either side of the house, and everybody was there. And whether that was a willingness for a pilot to go, I really want to be a part of the event, but I know somebody has to stand watch at night, I'm willing to cover that for you, to everybody just being there, doing whatever needed to be done. The lieutenant of the Chesterfield Fire Department, the lead medic, was loading dinner rolls into, the food trays. And I'm so proud to work with people like that are willing to check their ego at the door and go, this is what needs to get done for an event to be successful, for it to feel transparently like everything went right today. Well, it didn't, but I'm glad you felt that way.
Yeah.
And it was successful because of that collective effort.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Andrew, what you said about sometimes it's tough conversations. I think if you look at step 2 beyond checking your ego at the door, there's some baseline things that I also think we can improve on. And that is, leadership is not a popularity contest.
Right.
And many times we turn it into that. We want the guys to like us. And in result, we sometimes don't have those tough conversations. Tell a guy or a gal what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. That's the job of a leader. And I think one of the toughest thing a new supervisor has to do is to do just that, or to put that shortcoming in writing and say, here, sign this that says you're not as good as you need to be. That's tough to do. But when we actually make those decisions, we actually do that, we cross this leadership bridge, and the results, typically, if we do it right, you do it with respect, it changes.
Yeah.
And we do gain that respect at a different level. You've heard me say this before. A leader doesn't necessarily have to like people, but they need to love people. If you don't enjoy seeing your team excel, like Andrew just described here, you probably shouldn't be a leader.
Yeah.
I always joke, I like very few people, or maybe it's vice versa, I don't know, but I love that human behavior aspect, right? And you got to have that. So you have to have those tough conversations. What you permit, you promote.
Yeah.
What you tolerate, you don't change.
Yeah.
And when you're in that driver's seat, when you're in that leadership, that's your job to do those things. And when you actually do them and you cross that bridge, it's the results are incredible.
Yeah.
They really are. So
I kind of think of it as being a parent. As a parent, you have to punish your kids for things that they maybe did wrong. And you're not doing it because you want to. You're doing it to make them a better human being. Right. In the same way as a leader, you're not punishing or reprimanding somebody or giving them an improvement plan because you don't like them. You're doing it to better the organization, to better them as an individual.
Right.
So it is tough to look at that and be like, I really hate to do this, but really, at the end of the day, you're doing it for the overall benefit of the agency or unit and everybody else.
And in our business, you might be doing it for the safety, for their very lives.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. I love these conversations. These are always great conversations, and these are the ones that we get the best feedback on. You know, hearing folks like you guys talk about some of these concepts that aren't natural to a lot of people. You guys just seem to have the ability to relay this stuff that's important in a way that people can understand. You know, but one more thing I want to touch on before we move on to the beverages is technology. You know, I can't have a podcast recording of the three of you guys without talking about technology. You know, working for a technology company as Bell is, you guys have some unique insights and ability to steer the industry in ways that others don't. Technology, to me, is solving a lot of our industry's problems, you know. So I guess my question for each one of you is, what technology is relevant today that is going to change or is changing our industry for the better? What technology are you most excited about? And Terry, we'll start with you.
On all fronts is what I would say. Just like technology is advancing with those patrol cars, with those wheel guns, and all those examples we gave earlier, it's advancing on the aviation front, it's advancing on the aviation safety front to the point where, and I'll be careful how I say this, you can buy aviation safety through technology. I didn't say you can buy all your safety, but you can buy a piece of your safety through technology. If you go back 50-ish years ago and you look at the helicopter accident rate for this segment, we were about 90% technical failure. The helicopter industry as a whole, and about 10% human factor, morphed to today, in the last decade or two, it's flipped. We're less than 10% technical failure now and more than 90% human failure. And it's not that the human side got worse, it's that the technical side advanced. And so whether it's greater margins in engineering, whether it's a LiDAR technology that can now detect wires and hazards that we don't see with the naked eye and warn you like a smart car does, or it's improved weather radars, or it's FADAC units that help you not to overtemp that aircraft on the start. There's just a plethora, and as good as and as safe as we make our legacy aircraft out there, you really are missing out on that modern day technology if you're still flying those legacy aircraft.
Yeah, it's been crazy to see the advancements in the avionics and all the systems, you know, the FADEC systems and all those things that go with the technology advancements in aviation. It's been wild to see that, you know, from my perspective. I've been in aviation only for, 10 plus years. So, it's, short window. And it seems like even in that amount of time, it's developed rapidly.
Right.
For you, what's exciting for you?
I think that Terry's exactly right. There are so many interesting things that are being developed across the board. And what I love is that, how much more cost effective a lot of these systems are becoming. And I'll kind of touch on it in a second. But, John, you remember very early on I got started and we're using a FLIR 8500 at VSP, which is a little bit of an older system. And I was trying to get a handle on it. I come from the AH-1Z. It's got a target sight system made by Lockheed. It is a unbelievable sensor. So when I went to the FLIR 8500, which is very capable in its own right, but a little bit older, I came across the concept of a gyro null. And I was like, I don't know what this is. So I called John and I was like, hey man, he was like, I don't know, dude. I use a good sensor and it doesn't have that. And I was like, okay. He was like, but I got a guy for you, hold on. And so, Nick Binks and I talked and he walked me through it. And I went, okay. Well, now sensors are so much more capable. It's like, hey man, I don't have to focus on keeping a thumb transducer on a point, that I don't have to do so much training because technology is overcoming some of those things that need to be trained out or trained to. So it's really just impressive across the board to go, hey, they're becoming much more readily available. They're cost effective. I look at things like Blue Drop where you're doing VR hoisting.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep.
But you can buy, I can go onto Sporties and buy a monitor and a pedal and a yoke for $1,000, and with Microsoft Flight Simulator, create a pretty good simulator in a conference room. And then even still things like, getting a Frasca simulator is much more affordable than it used to be. So that's pretty exciting across the board. But what I do see is sometimes, you can look at equipment and go, well, I'm going to buy a solution here and the focus becomes away from the person executing the mission. And that's my only concern is like, you can have really nice stuff. You still got to put the touch time in to be good at it.
Sure.
And some of it's going to be easier, right? We didn't have a north-seeking arrow in our target sight system until like a couple of software iterations ago. And then when guys from the military will come over and they'll stop by the hangar and they'll check things out. And when they see like an augmented reality mapping system, they're like, are you kidding me? Like the names and stuff are on the streets, dude. And I was like, I know. And we're using an 8x10 sheet of paper grid reference graphic where I'm like, okay, that's building 103. And this technology is amazing, but it is really important that you don't forget that the person in the box is the one executing the mission.
Right.
And sometimes I see that with 135, that decisions go to a network operations center and we want to turn it into an airline. It's not. At the end of the day, the guy in the knock isn't going to help you with the wire strike that's in front of you.
Yeah.
So you got to go out and you got to fly in low light level conditions, and you got to get people comfortable with emergency procedures, and you have to get them comfortable doing mission equipment or mission scenarios. And I heard such great stuff. Yesterday, Steph was just talking about some of the drills that you can run doing hoisting operations that, hey, put a person, I'm gonna give away a trade secret here, so I'm sorry. Like I'm gonna give this one away for free. But he was talking about, hey, you put a person in the middle of the hangar and you have your hoist operator walk them directionally around the hangar and just give them those calls, forward 10, forward 5, forward 1, and get the cadence, direction, distance, all of that stuff down. And it's such a cheap way to train that you can have super great stuff. There are awesome simulator, there's great technology that's out there, but I think it sometimes fundamentally comes back to those blocking and tackling skills that, here's kind of a funny thing we used to do with close air support guys is when you take a close air support brief, we call it the 9-line format, and you break down all of the different elements of the attack brief, but we would sit a co-pilot in an office chair and we'd push him around and spin him around the room while we're giving him the information, right? Just to make sure that, hey, he's able to copy it down, but two, that he's also able to maintain situational awareness about what's going on. And you'd have another guy somewhere in the room doing something crazy. It's probably like you've seen the gorilla video where the guy like walks through the background. It's kind of the same concept that you're asking guys to, hey, I need you to maintain situational awareness as the world is moving around you and your head's down and your head's up and you're not getting lost in the soda straw, the sensor. You're still being able to go outside and kind of maintain focus on a large georef. So for me, like technology is making the job way easier. You've seen that with improved sensor performance. You've seen that with things like augmented reality. You've seen training that the technology is allowing you to do it at a level of fidelity that was not previously done. But I think it is also important to go, those solutions do not replace the human element of needing to go out and do high fidelity training. So, my last plug here for Flight Suit Friday is they talk about hard, realistic training saves lives. And I think that that's what it comes down to. You can have some tools that really make that training next level with the technology, but going out and doing the training is the important piece.
Yeah, absolutely. But training it's really interesting. I think of my first stint as a TFO, and really my only opportunity to go out and get on-the-job training was in flight. And now you talk about some of these programs like Blue Drop and some of the other VR type programs, you can get experience as a TFO on the ground. Even if it's just watching YouTube videos of camera footage from aviation units that have done certain things, looking at that and figuring out how you would call that yourself, putting yourself in those scenarios where you're learning when you're not turning rotors, because that's expensive. So I think that's going to pay big dividends in our unit or in our industry as we go forward, seeing how these young folks can get experience. Even if you work for an agency, it doesn't get a lot of call volume,
Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third-generation Night Sun series high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights.
It's a challenging thing. When I had students as a Cobra instructor, I used to talk to them about the importance of chair flying. And so there was an old video about the Blue Angels years and years ago. They just came out with a new one on Amazon, but they talk about chair flying, right? And you see these guys, these 6 guys that are at the top of the profession, and at how much time they spend in a room flying the perfect routine. Like, I mean, down to the second, down to the voice of the boss. I mean, it's super impressive. But you go, that is in a scenario that is repeatable every single time. And so as a TFO, sometimes it's hard to go, all right, man, I want you to chair fly the scenario. Okay. Well, no scenario is the same, man. He's going to go west. He's going to go north. He's going to hide behind a trash can. And so sometimes, getting things like FLIR Sim, where you can be a little bit of the mastermind behind there and go, well, I'm going to create a scenario, and the scenario is going to be this disaster. It's going to be this style scenario. This is the training objective. There's multiple elements to it. So yes, it is important to go in there, and you need to get the touch time of moving the sensor around and getting comfortable with the mission equipment. But you got to go out and do it at some level, because the scenario is unpredictable, and you can only take people so far, right? So that's another Flight Suit Friday thing that I'm going to steal from Kenny Sanborn, is the proficiency top off, right? They talk about the situation in the Coast Guard that some are just too hard to train to. Night vert surface, too much risk to potentially train to that. So I'm going to take you to 80%. The last 20%'s on you, man. Like, you got to figure out how to do it on game day. But I'm going to do the best I can to get you, 3/4 of the way towards the goal line.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes that's just the emphasis that you have as Brian Smith, as your brother's keeper, making sure that everybody's able to play at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. For you in that training environment, what's your kind of take on what we're talking about?
For technology, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has, I think, evolved over the last few years. We're seeing a lot more cameras installed at aircraft all over the place. Tails, cabins, top of hoists, all kinds of stuff. They're allowing us to go back and kind of watch and debrief training and missions. Downlink technology is another thing, where you're able to downlink and, stream patrol, information directly to a TAC team or a SWAT team. That's evolved quite a bit. The UAS drone technology, that's a whole nother discussion, where that's really starting to evolve. I think so fast that in a lot of ways we can't even keep up with it.
Yeah.
The Axis wireless ICS system, man, priceless. That stuff for especially when you're talking about like hoisting and stuff. We had a situation during a training evolution not too long ago with SAC Metro Fire. We're flying in a Huey, old legacy Huey, night hoisting, and one of our instructors is on the hook halfway into the cabin, and one of the rescuers has got a tagline on him, and he's in a hot seat, and we get a chip light. And, in the Huey where the master caution is and all that, the pilot is looking out on goggles, but he's looking far out his right window, so he doesn't see it. Nobody sees it except for me. And I'm like, hey, we got a master caution, we got a chip light, But our guy on the hook heard that immediately, and the hoist operator immediately started paying cable out. He gets on the ground, disconnects from the hook. They're getting the tagline. We're recovering it. We're moving away. But our guy knew what was going on and was able to get off the hook immediately, because it's like he's sitting in the aircraft. He's on the ICS system.
Yep.
So, that, you mentioned the Blue Drop. That simulator is incredible with the fidelity of the cable. The cable has physics, and, the more weight that's on it and the more that it's swinging, and, you feel the weight moving in the cable. It's incredible, coupled with their VR. But I think me personally, my overall is just the increased aircraft technology is incredible. Not only the capability, but as a pilot, going from like my first, several years of hoist missions in an old school Huey with steam gauges, which was great. I love that experience was the foundation. But then when you move into, to a technically advanced aircraft, and the workload reducers that, all these OEMs are providing us, and just the ability to get in there, and, there's access 4SX autopilots. There's, the first time I flew an aircraft with an FLI, I'm like, you're kidding. I just look at one thing. That's amazing. Like, that's incredible. Being able to fly something and, not have to have my hands on the controls the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Your situational awareness, your workload goes down, and then the capabilities of the aircraft, they're incredible.
Yeah.
So overall for me, just as a pilot, I'm going to be selfish and say the aircraft, but, there's huge leaps in technology across the board.
Yeah,
we're seeing.
It's been fun to watch, and I'm excited to see where a lot of these programs go going forward. There's endless possibilities, and as AI comes into the forefront of things, I'll be excited to see how that changes how the direction of this technology and how we utilize that information. Talk about data and how important that is. It'll be really cool to see how we utilize that data going forward. So
Dude, that's so funny. You talk about the FLI. You know, it's just it's those small nuances that like I love. we have a whole different. We have a number of different types of aircraft at VSP. We have a 2000 analog 407 with steam gauges in there, all the way up to a GXI. You know, the 412 EPIs, all glass. And it's so funny that, you know, coming sometimes from the military that I don't have that much tailorability in it. If I go between an analog and a GXI, I'm like, man, I really miss the PSI, the FLI. And then for the 412, you know, I was so grateful the other day. We have to get on board VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University's hospital here. It's about a 380-foot elevated helipad. And I was coming in, and it's kind of like, a right, you're putting the pad right out your right window. And I went up the Cat A page, the composite page, and it's like, cool. I have all my flight information, and then boom, right underneath it, I have this nice little power situation indicator. So I got one screen in view. I'm out the right door. I don't have to kind of come back and do the cross check. And I was like, I could do this 10 years ago. Like, I can't even do this in a Cobra. Like, it's amazing sometimes what you're able to do in an aircraft now.
That's incredible.
I love it.
Yeah, it is.
Andrew, I was just going to say, I know a guy that can fix that steam gauge aircraft of yours problem. So we'll
Fair
talk
enough.
later.
Fair enough.
Hey, show them the picture of the original helicopter, and then I mean, that's a game changer. But.
It's funny. I saw the wheels turning. And I'm like, what's he brewing with over here? And there it was. Well, again, guys, thank you for sitting down and going through this stuff. Really great topics we went through. Before we close out, anything you want to touch on before we split?
John, so we took a vote while you were on break, and as the three gentlemen of your lowest rated,
come on right now,
your lowest rated episodes, we've decided that you need a hot seat question.
Oh boy. I'm going to hit mute. Here we go.
And I don't have one in mind.
No, I thought you had one lined
I
out.
was thinking about, what's your favorite color on an animal and a cartoon character, blah, blah, blah. But
didn't come out.
We're going to, unlike your guest, we'll let you off the hook.
Okay. All right. Well, it was really cool. I thought I'd walk back after my short recess and see a dog in the seat or something. But my
only
surprise,
because
there's nothing I know about yet.
It's only because one didn't walk by, and I'm serious. Had one walked by, there would be one sitting in the chair. But
my Instagram notifications are going off, so I feel like you guys did something, and it's posted on social media somewhere. I just don't know what it is yet.
Time will tell, my friend.
Okay.
Yeah, time will tell. I don't know.
Well, Andrew, for you, anything in closing?
No, man, I appreciate you having me on. Sometimes I feel like a little bit of imposter syndrome, sitting here. Like, it's Terry was talking about a few things that he said, and I flipped back into my Idea Pirate notebook here, and I legitimately was like, Bell, Terry, good, bad, ugly of safety culture. And I went back to this lecture that I listened to in South Carolina, years ago. And I mean, there it is, all the stuff that we talked about. And I was just like, hey, these are great learning points that I want to pull. So, I'm so grateful to be here with you guys, having these kind of conversations, feeling like maybe I shouldn't be at the table, but I appreciate that I got the invite. And, I'm just really thankful for everything that's kind of happened over the last couple of days. I was really grateful for the department to back the fly-in the way that they did, to have the level of excitement. So grateful for Echo to have us out here and be so supportive. So, no, man, I'm just feeling a lot of gratitude right now.
Yeah, you've earned a seat at the table for sure. I mean, you're doing some great stuff, man, and I'm excited to see where your career goes going forward, and the things that you accomplish, through your leadership skills and your influence, because it's pretty cool. The northeastern part of the U.S. is very fortunate to have you in the position you're in. Being in Virginia, I feel like you guys geographically can have some influence over a lot of different areas and states. So it's just kind of neat that you're kind of in the middle of the East Coast and can work that whole area. So looking forward to that. For you, again, thank you for hanging out. You got 1 million people trying to come by and get business, and you sacrifice some time to come hang out with us and talk and benefit our industry. So thank you for that. And any closing thoughts before we head out of here?
No, I just, I want to thank you, all three of you. It's always an honor and a privilege. I think I humbly, I mean, I feel like I'm sitting here amongst giants myself, between the three of you guys. So yeah, thank you. And I think, the one thing I always tell people is just, don't underestimate the impact you can have on your organization, your unit, your community, any of those things. And, just don't stop trying to make yourself and everybody around you better. It's something that we're always striving to do, myself included. But yeah, thank you. And it's a privilege to sit there and, talk with you folks. So yeah, thank you.
All right.
John, you started out with this, the value of the fly-in and the cross-field of information, that education. My shouting parting comment will be, you're doing that on a very, very broad level with these broadcasts. And I don't even need to explain it because your listeners know. But so thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
You are a giant in that regard. So thank you.
Well, thanks. That's the only time anybody's ever referred to me as a giant.
It is almost happy hour. So
well, thank you all for doing what you do, and we'll catch you later. All right. Cheers.
Thanks, buddy.
Super. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third-generation Night Sun series high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights. Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking. Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Recorded live at the Echo Public Safety Aviation Conference in Richmond, Virginia. We want to extend our heartfelt thanks to our guests Terry Miyauchi, Dave Callen, and Andrew Baity for sharing their invaluable insights into the world of public safety aviation. Throughout our conversation, we explored the critical importance of networking, training, and collaboration among agencies, especially in times of emergency. The discussions on building relationships through fly-ins and the pressing need for continuous training truly underscore the foundation of safety and operational efficiency in our field. We address the challenges of funding and the significance of recurrent training, emphasizing that continuous education and a culture of accountability are essential for enhancing public safety efforts. Leadership development and setting egos aside are key to fostering a supportive and growth-oriented environment in aviation. As technology continues to reshape our industry, let's not forget the human element. Communication, teamwork, and skill maintenance are just as crucial. We encourage you to take these insights back to your teams and communities, fostering collaboration and continuous improvement. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next episode, where we'll continue to explore the evolving landscape of public safety aviation. Safe flying, and see you next time. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.